The pill organizer sat on my kitchen counter like a small plastic accusation, 7 days of compartments staring back at me. 3 empty slots where my morning medications should have been, but I knew I'd taken them. I remembered the bitter taste of the blood pressure pill, the way the anxiety medication stuck briefly in my throat despite the orange juice chaser. Yet here was the evidence suggesting otherwise, and apparently, it wasn't just the pill organizer keeping track. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the phone message slip I'd written during yesterday's call with Dr. Morrison's office. The nurse had been unusually detailed about medication compliance, asking pointed questions about whether I was really following the prescription schedule, and mentioning that someone close to me had expressed concerns. The conversation had felt off, invasive in a way that made my stomach clench with anxiety. Before I reveal what really happened, please hit that subscribe button and like. I love hearing from viewers. What's your city? My name is Sarah Hunter, I'm 54 years old, and I've been managing my health conditions independently for over a decade. The medications aren't complicated. Blood pressure, anxiety, and a supplement for the arthritis in my hands. I've never been the type to skip doses or ignore doctor's orders. After my father's heart attack when I was 30, I learned to take health seriously. But someone was painting a different picture to my medical team, and the realization hit me like a physical blow. Only a handful of people knew the details of my medication routine, and even fewer had access to my daily habits. The thought that someone I trusted was undermining my relationship with my doctor made me feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with missed pills. I heard the front door open and my daughter Jessica Hunter's voice calling out, "Mom, I brought those groceries you wanted." At 28, Jessica had inherited my tendency to worry and my ex-husband's stubborn streak when it came to family loyalty. She'd been stopping by more frequently lately, always with some excuse about helping with errands or checking on the house. "In the kitchen, honey," I called back, sliding the phone message under a stack of mail. Something in my daughter's timing felt too convenient, her increased attention too focused. The way she'd started asking casual questions about my doctor's appointments and whether I was feeling okay had seemed caring at first, but now took on a different tone in my mind. Jessica appeared in the doorway, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun, still wearing her scrubs from the physical therapy clinic where she worked. "You look tired, Mom. Are you sleeping okay?" Her eyes drifted to the pill organizer on the counter, lingering just a moment too long. "I'm fine, just thinking about some things," I said, watching her face for any tells. "How was work today?" "Busy, you know how it is." She began unpacking groceries, her movements efficient but distracted. "I ran into Mrs. Patterson at the store. She mentioned she hasn't seen you at the community center lately for your yoga class." The comment struck me as odd. Eleanor Patterson had been my closest friend for 15 years, ever since we'd met in a grief support group after losing our mothers within months of each other. Eleanor knew my schedule better than anyone, knew I'd switched to morning walks instead of yoga because the class had become too crowded. Why would she tell Jessica she hadn't seen me there? "Eleanor said that?" I asked carefully. "That's strange. I talked to her just last week about changing my routine." Jessica paused in her unpacking, a can of soup halfway to the pantry. "Maybe I misunderstood. You know how grocery store conversations go. Lots of noise, people rushing around." But her explanation felt rehearsed, and the knot in my stomach tightened. Eleanor Patterson was 72, sharp as ever, and not prone to confusion or miscommunication. If anything, she was almost aggressively clear in her speech, a trait that sometimes made social situations awkward, but left no room for misunderstandings. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor David Chen, who lived in the duplex next to mine. David was a retired accountant who'd become an unexpected friend after helping me sort through insurance paperwork following a minor car accident 2 years ago. His message was brief. "Can you call when you get a chance? Something came up that I think you should know about." The timing felt like more than coincidence. David wasn't prone to drama or urgent communications. Our friendship was built on quiet conversations over morning coffee and shared complaints about the city's inconsistent trash pickup schedule. For him to reach out with something that couldn't wait suggested he'd stumbled across information that made him uncomfortable. I excused myself from Jessica, claiming I needed to return David's call about a package delivery, and stepped onto the back porch. The October air carried the smell of burning leaves and the distant sound of children playing in Riverside Park. Normal sounds of a normal day, but nothing felt normal anymore. "David, it's Sarah. What's going on?" His voice was hesitant, careful in the way people sound when they're about to deliver bad news. "Sarah, I hate to be the bearer of uncomfortable information, but I overheard something yesterday that's been bothering me." Eleanor was on her front porch talking to someone on the phone, and I couldn't help but hear parts of the conversation. My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of conversation?" "She was talking about your medications, about concerns that you might not be taking them properly. She mentioned calling your doctor's office to share her observations." David paused, and I could hear him sigh. "Look, I know Eleanor means well, but it sounded like she was reporting on you rather than talking with you. I thought you should know." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Eleanor, who had held my hand through panic attacks and driven me to medical appointments when Jessica was too busy with work. Eleanor, who knew my daily routine because she genuinely cared about my well-being. Eleanor, who had access to my house and had helped me organize my medications during the confusing weeks after my anxiety diagnosis. "Are you sure it was about me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "She used your name, mentioned Dr. Morrison specifically." "I'm sorry, Sarah. I debated whether to tell you, but if someone was discussing my private medical information behind my back, I'd want to know." After hanging up, I stood on the porch, trying to process the betrayal. Eleanor wasn't just sharing gossip or expressing casual concern. She was actively interfering in my medical care, creating doubt about my competence and reliability. The thought made me feel exposed and vulnerable in a way I hadn't experienced since the early days of my divorce, when I'd learned that people I trusted had been discussing my personal business behind closed doors. Jessica was still in the kitchen when I returned, but now she was seated at the table with a cup of tea, clearly settling in for a longer visit. Her presence, which usually comforted me, now felt charged with potential complications. How much did she know about Eleanor's phone calls? Was she part of this concern, or another victim of Eleanor's interference? "Mom, can we talk about something?" Jessica's voice carried the tone she'd used as a teenager when approaching difficult subjects. "I've been worried about you lately. You seem more anxious, more scattered than usual." The irony wasn't lost on me. If I seemed more anxious, it might be because someone was undermining my privacy and autonomy, creating exactly the kind of situation that triggered my worst fears about aging and independence. "What specifically are you worried about?" I asked, settling across from her at the table. "Little things. You mentioned forgetting to lock the front door last week. You seemed confused about your appointment time when Dr. Morrison's office called to confirm, and Eleanor mentioned that she's noticed some things too." There it was. Eleanor had been reporting to my daughter as well as my doctor, building a case for my incompetence through a collection of minor, explainable incidents. The forgotten lock had happened once, during a week when I was dealing with a particularly stressful situation at work. The appointment confusion had been the office's error. They'd changed the time and failed to notify me properly. But presented through Eleanor's filter, these incidents became evidence of decline rather than normal human forgetfulness. "Jessica, has Eleanor been calling you regularly about me?" I asked directly. My daughter's face flushed slightly. "She cares about you, Mom. We both do. If there are problems, we want to help." "That's not what I asked." The silence stretched between us, filled with years of shared history and the new tension of divided loyalties. Jessica had always been close to Eleanor, had even called her Aunt Elle during her teenage years, when she'd needed an adult confidant outside the immediate family drama of divorce and adjustment. "She's called a few times," Jessica admitted finally. "She's noticed things that concern her, and she thought I should be aware." The careful phrasing told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't casual concern or friendly checking in. This was systematic monitoring and reporting, with Eleanor as the self-appointed coordinator of my care, and Jessica as the dutiful family member being prepared for intervention. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Eleanor herself. The timing felt calculated, as if she'd been watching the house and had seen David and me talking on the porch. Jessica glanced at the phone display and then at me, her expression expectant. I let the call go to voicemail. "Aren't you going to answer?" Jessica asked. "Not right now," I said. "I need to think about some things first." The pill organizer still sat on the counter, its empty compartments no longer looking like evidence of my failure, but rather like pieces in a puzzle I was finally beginning to understand. Eleanor had access to my kitchen, had helped me set up the weekly pill system, had been present during conversations with Jessica about my health concerns. How easy would it be for someone with good intentions and misguided worry to create the very evidence they thought they were observing? One small detail blew the whole thing open. After Jessica left, promising to think about what I'd told her, I found myself alone with questions that demanded answers. The voicemail from Eleanor waited on my phone like an unexploded bomb. I needed to hear it, but first I wanted to examine my pill organizer more carefully. Under the bright kitchen light, I noticed something I'd missed before. The plastic compartments showed wear patterns that didn't match my routine. Small scratches around the edges suggested frequent handling, more than my once-weekly filling would cause. I always filled it Sunday mornings with my coffee, a ritual I'd maintained for 3 years without fail. I played Eleanor's voicemail. Her voice carried that particular tone of manufactured concern I was beginning to recognize. "Oh, honey, I hope you're feeling well today. I stopped by earlier, but you weren't home. I wanted to check on how you're managing with your medications. Jessica and I are both worried, and I think it might be time to consider some additional support systems. Call me back when you can." Additional support systems. The phrase made my skin crawl. I'd heard Jessica use similar language when discussing her grandmother's transition to assisted living years ago. David called 20 minutes later. "How did it go with Jessica?" "Complicated," I said. "She's been getting regular reports from Eleanor. They're building a case, David, whether they realize it or not." "What kind of case?" "The kind that ends with someone else making decisions about my life." I moved to the window, watching Eleanor's house. Her car wasn't in the driveway. "I need to figure out exactly what's been happening, but I can't do it alone." "What do you need?" His immediate offer of help, no questions asked, reminded me why our friendship had survived 40 years and 2 divorces between us. "Can you come over tomorrow morning? Early, before Eleanor usually stops by?" "Of course. What are we looking for?" "Evidence," I said. "I think Eleanor has been sabotaging my pill routine to create the very problem she's reporting." The next morning, David arrived at 7 with coffee and pastries, settling in at my kitchen table, like we were planning something perfectly normal, instead of investigating my best friend's betrayal. "Walk me through your medication routine," he said, pulling out a notebook. David had always been methodical, a trait that had served him well in his engineering career and apparently in friendship too. I demonstrated my Sunday morning process, filling each compartment with the prescribed doses, while David took notes. We timed everything, documented the routine, even photographed the wear patterns on the organizer. "Now show me Eleanor's access," David said. That was harder to document but equally revealing. Eleanor had a key, knew my schedule, and had established a pattern of helpful check-ins that put her alone in my kitchen regularly. She knew which cabinet held my medications, had helped me organize them by frequency and time of day. "The perfect setup," David observed grimly. At 9:30, we heard Eleanor's key in the front door. David and I exchanged glances as her cheerful voice called out, "Just me, checking in." She appeared in the kitchen doorway, freezing when she saw David. Her smile flickered but held. "Oh, David, I didn't know you were here. How lovely." She looked between us, taking in the notebook, the pill organizer on the table, the careful documentation of my routine. "What are you two up to?" "We're trying to solve a mystery," I said calmly. "Someone has been interfering with my medications and reporting concerns about my health management. Any ideas who might do something like that?" Eleanor's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise and hurt, and something that looked almost like relief. She pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "I can explain," she said quietly. David closed his notebook but kept his pen ready. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I've been so worried about you," Eleanor began. "Since Harold died, you've seemed different. Forgetful, distracted. I thought if I could document some problems, maybe Jessica could help convince you to accept more support." "So you created problems to document," David said, his voice carefully neutral. Eleanor's hands twisted in her lap. "I never meant to hurt you. I just moved a few pills around sometimes, maybe took one or two so it would look like you'd missed doses. I thought if the doctor saw a pattern—" "You've been poisoning my relationship with my daughter," I said, the words coming out harder than I'd intended. "Making her think I'm losing my mind." "That's not what I meant to do." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I love you like a sister. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to you because you were too proud to ask for help." The kitchen fell silent except for the clock ticking above the stove. 3 friendships hung in the balance, along with trust that had taken decades to build. David cleared his throat. "Eleanor, you understand that what you've done is wrong," she finished. "Completely wrong." "I know that now." I studied my oldest friend's face, searching for the woman who had held my hand through my divorce, who had celebrated my successes and mourned my losses. She was still there, underneath the misguided worry and controlling behavior. "The question is what we do now," I said. Eleanor looked up hopefully. "Can you forgive me?" "Eventually, maybe. But first you need to fix this mess with Jessica." Before Eleanor could respond, the front door opened again, and Jessica's voice called out, "Mom! Eleanor! I saw both your cars here." David raised his eyebrows at me. Jessica appeared in the kitchen, taking in the scene with the sharp assessment that had made her a successful attorney. "What's going on?" she asked, but her tone suggested she already suspected. Eleanor began to cry in earnest now. "Oh, Jessica, I've made such a terrible mistake." Jessica set her purse down on the counter with deliberate precision, her lawyer instincts clearly engaged. I watched my daughter's face as she processed the scene. Eleanor's tear-streaked cheeks, David's serious expression, my own carefully controlled composure. "Someone want to tell me what's happening here?" Jessica asked, though her tone had softened when she saw Eleanor's distress. I felt a strange calm settling over me. For weeks, I'd been second-guessing myself, wondering if I really was becoming forgetful, if age was catching up with me faster than I'd realized. Now, with the truth finally emerging, I felt more clear-headed than I had in months. "Eleanor has something she needs to tell you," I said, keeping my voice steady. Eleanor looked up at Jessica with red-rimmed eyes. "I've been tampering with your mother's medications." Jessica's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine shock. "What do you mean, tampering?" "Moving pills around in the weekly organizer, taking some out, making it look like she was missing doses or taking them at the wrong times." Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. "I thought if her doctor saw problems, maybe you'd both realize she needed more help." I watched Jessica's face cycle through confusion, anger, and something that looked like relief. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from Eleanor. "So, Mom isn't—" Jessica started, then looked at me. "You're not having memory issues?" "Not any more than usual," I said. "I've been questioning myself for weeks, wondering if I was losing it. Every time you called with another concern from the doctor, I felt a little more uncertain about my own mind." David leaned forward slightly. "That's psychological manipulation, even if it wasn't intentional." "It was wrong," Eleanor said quickly. "Completely wrong. I can see that now. I lost Harold so suddenly, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too, because I didn't speak up about something." Jessica was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "Eleanor, do you understand what you put us through? What you put Mom through? I do now. I've been lying awake at night, worrying about Mom's safety, planning interventions, researching assisted living facilities." Jessica's composure cracked slightly. "I've been preparing to have the hardest conversation of my life with her." The weight of that revelation hit me square in the chest. My capable, independent daughter had been carrying this burden alone, trying to figure out how to help a mother she thought was declining. "Jess," I said softly. She shook her head. "I should have talked to you directly. Should have trusted that you'd tell me if you were struggling." "You were trying to protect me," I said. "Eleanor was trying to protect me. Everyone was trying to protect me except from the actual problem." David cleared his throat. "The question now is how to move forward. Eleanor, you need to contact Dr. Phillips and explain what you've done." Eleanor's face went pale. "What if she calls the police? What if Jessica reports me to the bar association or something?" "I'm not going to report you," Jessica said quietly. "But you have to understand that trust, once broken like this, doesn't just snap back into place." I studied my oldest friend, seeing her clearly for the first time in months. The hovering, the constant suggestions about getting help, the way she'd insert herself into conversations with my doctor. I'd attributed it all to grief and loneliness after Harold's death. But now, I could see the pattern of control. "Eleanor, I need you to be completely honest with me," I said. "Is this the first time you've done something like this? Or have there been other situations where you've created problems to justify solutions?" Eleanor's silence stretched too long. "There was the incident with the stove," she finally admitted. My blood ran cold. 2 months ago, Eleanor had arrived for coffee and found a burner still on under an empty pot. She'd been so concerned, had made such a big deal about it, had suggested maybe I shouldn't be cooking without supervision. You turned that burner on, I said. I smelled gas when I came in. I thought maybe you'd tried to light it and forgotten. So I turned it on to make it look like. She stopped, seeing the horror on Jessica's face. Eleanor, David said sharply. You could have burned down the house. No, I was right there. I wouldn't have let anything happen. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is worse than I thought. Mom, you can't have her in the house anymore. The finality in my daughter's voice surprised me. Jessica was usually measured, diplomatic, but she was looking at Eleanor like she'd never seen her before. That might be a bit extreme, I started, but Jessica cut me off. She's been systematically undermining your independence and your mental health. She created a gas leak in your kitchen. What's next? Eleanor rose shakily from her chair. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love your mother. She's all I have left. That's the problem, Jessica said. You've made Mom responsible for filling the hole Harold left, and when she didn't need you enough, you decided to make her need you. The psychological accuracy of Jessica's assessment hung in the air. Eleanor's face crumpled, but she didn't deny it. David closed his notebook and stood. I think Eleanor needs to leave now, and Margaret, you need to decide what you want to do about Dr. Phillips and the medication records. As Eleanor gathered her purse with trembling hands, she turned back to me one last time. Can you ever forgive me? I wanted to say yes, wanted to restore the easy friendship we'd had for 40 years. But looking at her now, I wasn't sure who she really was anymore. I don't know, I said honestly. After Eleanor left, Jessica slumped back into her chair. How long do you think this has been going on? I've been questioning myself for months, I admitted. Maybe longer. David was studying me with concern. Are you okay? Really okay? I took a deep breath, testing my own mental state. I think so. Better than I've felt in a while, actually. It's amazing how much clearer things seem when you're not constantly doubting your own perceptions. Jessica reached across the table and took my hand. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have trusted you more. You were working with the information you had. But I know you. I should have known something was off about the whole situation. David gathered his things. I'll stay in town another day or two, just to make sure everything's settled. And Margaret, I really think you should call Dr. Phillips sooner rather than later. After David left, Jessica and I sat in the quiet kitchen. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, and for the first time in weeks, my home felt peaceful instead of fraught. What are you thinking? Jessica asked. That I need to call Eleanor tomorrow. There are things I need to know. Like what? Like how long she's been manipulating situations. Like what else she might have done that I attributed to my own failings. I paused. Like whether the friendship can survive this at all. Jessica squeezed my hand. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. As evening settled around us, I felt both relief and a growing unease. Eleanor's desperation had led her to dangerous behavior, and I couldn't shake the feeling that her confession might not have been complete. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Jessica answered it, and I watched her face change as she listened. Mom, she said, covering the receiver. It's Eleanor. She says there's something else she needs to tell us. I stared at the phone in Jessica's hand, my stomach churning. What could she possibly have left to tell us? Jessica's grip tightened on the receiver. Should I hang up? No. I took a shaky breath. Put it on speaker. I want you to hear whatever this is. Jessica pressed the button, and Eleanor's voice filled the kitchen, thin and strained. Margaret? Are you there? I'm here, Eleanor. Jessica's with me. What is it? A long pause, then the sound of Eleanor crying. I can't live with myself. There's more. So much more. Jessica and I exchanged glances. My daughter's face had gone pale. Eleanor? I said carefully. What are you talking about? The medications weren't the only thing. God, Margaret, I've been interfering for years. Small things at first, but then it got worse. My heart started pounding. What kind of interfering? Remember when you thought you were losing your memory? When you couldn't find your car keys, your reading glasses, your checkbook? The room seemed to tilt. Eleanor, what did you do? I would move things when I came over. Hide them. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just trying to make you need me more. But when you started getting so upset about it, when you mentioned it to Dr. Phillips. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You made my mother think she was losing her mind? I never meant for it to go that far. Eleanor's voice cracked. But when Dr. Phillips started asking about memory issues, and then the medication thing happened, it all spiraled out of control. I felt dizzy. Months of self-doubt, of questioning my own competence, of lying awake at night wondering if I was developing dementia. How could you do that to me? I was so lonely after Harold died. You were the only constant thing in my life, but you seemed so independent, so capable. I was terrified you'd realize you didn't need me anymore. Jessica leaned over the phone, her voice sharp with anger. So you decided to gaslight her? To make her question her own sanity? It wasn't supposed to be like that. I just wanted to feel useful again. Useful? I found my voice, and it was stronger than I expected. Eleanor, you made me think I was going crazy. Do you have any idea what that's like? The fear, the constant second-guessing myself? I know, and I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix the damage you've done, Jessica said, pacing now. My mother spent months worried sick about her mental health because of you. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. Is there anything else, Eleanor? Any other ways you've been manipulating my life? Another long pause. The book club. What about the book club? Remember when they stopped calling you for meetings? When you thought they were excluding you? My blood went cold. Tell me. I told them you'd been acting strange, that you seemed confused and forgetful. I said maybe they should give you some space until you felt better. Jessica stopped pacing and stared at the phone. You isolated her from her friends? I thought if she felt more alone, she'd rely on me more. I never thought about how much it would hurt her. I sank back into my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of Eleanor's betrayal. My book club friends. They've been avoiding me for months. I thought I'd done something wrong. Margaret, please. I was so scared of losing you. Harold's death left me with nothing, and you were all I had left. So you decided to destroy my confidence and isolate me from everyone else? The anger was building now, burning away the shock. That's not friendship, Eleanor. That's abuse. Jessica came around the table and put her hand on my shoulder. Mom, are you okay? I looked up at her. Actually, yes. I'm angry, but I'm okay. For the first time in months, everything makes sense. Eleanor's voice came through the speaker, barely a whisper. What can I do to make this right? I don't know if you can, I said honestly. You need to call Dr. Phillips first thing tomorrow and explain everything. Every lie you told him. I will. And you need to contact the book club. Tell them the truth about what you said. Yes, of course. Jessica leaned toward the phone. Eleanor, do you understand that what you did wasn't just wrong? It was dangerous? What if Mom had actually changed her medications because of your lies? I never thought about that. I wasn't thinking clearly. No, I said firmly. You were thinking very clearly. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. This was calculated manipulation over months, maybe years. Silence on the other end of the line. Eleanor, I need time to process all of this. Don't call me again until you've spoken to Dr. Phillips and the book club. And even then, I don't know if I'll be ready to talk. Please don't cut me out of your life completely. I know I don't deserve it, but... You're right, I said quietly. You don't deserve it. Not right now. I nodded to Jessica, who ended the call. We sat in the sudden quiet, both of us staring at the phone. Mom, I'm so proud of how you handled that. I feel like I've been living in someone else's version of reality for months. I rubbed my temples. All those times I thought I was losing my mind. But you weren't. You were completely sane, and Eleanor was gaslighting you. I looked at my daughter, grateful for her steady presence. I need to call David. He should know about this before he leaves town. Good idea. And Mom? When you're ready, maybe you should reach out to your book club friends directly. I bet they'd be relieved to hear from you. Just as I reached for the phone to call David, it rang again. Jessica and I both froze. If that's Eleanor again? Jessica started, but the caller ID showed David's name. Jessica answered quickly. David, we were just about to call you. She paused, listening. What do you mean, you ran into Eleanor at the hotel? My stomach dropped as I watched Jessica's expression change from concern to alarm. She said what? Jessica's voice rose. David, get back over here right now. Jessica kept the phone pressed to her ear, her face growing paler with each word David spoke. I could hear the urgency in his voice even from across the table, though I couldn't make out the specific words. Slow down, David. Tell me exactly what she said to you. Jessica grabbed a pen and started scribbling notes on the back of an envelope. She told the hotel staff what? My heart began racing. Whatever Eleanor had done, it was escalating beyond our phone conversation. I motioned for Jessica to put the call on speaker, but she was too focused on writing to notice. Okay, just get back here safely. Don't engage with her if you see her again. Jessica finally ended the call and turned to me with a grim expression. Mom, we have a bigger problem. Eleanor went to David's hotel after she called us. She told the front desk staff that David was her nephew and that he was having some kind of mental health crisis. She said she was worried about him being alone and asked them to do a wellness check on his room. I felt the blood drain from my face. She what? The hotel manager knocked on David's door, asking if he was okay and if he needed medical assistance. David was completely confused until the manager mentioned that his concerned Aunt Eleanor had requested the check. That's when David realized what was happening and called us immediately. I stood up so quickly that my chair scraped against the floor. This is insane. She's not just lying about me anymore. She's involving David, involving strangers. It gets worse, Mom. David said Eleanor was still in the lobby when he came down to leave. She tried to approach him, saying she was worried about the whole family and that someone needed to intervene before things got out of hand. My hands were shaking now. The calculated nature of Eleanor's actions was becoming clear. This wasn't just about friendship or concern. This was something much more disturbing. What did David tell her? He said he walked right past her without saying a word. But Mom, she followed him to the parking lot. She kept saying things like, "This family is in crisis, and someone has to be the voice of reason." I began pacing around the kitchen, my mind racing. She's creating a narrative where she's the hero, and we're all falling apart. First with Dr. Phillips, then with the book club, and now she's involving random hotel staff. Exactly, and David said she seemed almost frantic. Like she was spiraling because her usual methods weren't working anymore. The front door burst open and David rushed in, his hair disheveled and his face flushed. "Mom, thank God you're okay. I was worried Eleanor might have come here after the hotel incident." I hugged him tightly. "We're fine. Jessica filled me in on what happened. This is getting scary, David." "Scary is an understatement." David loosened his tie and sat down heavily at the kitchen table. The hotel manager looked at me like I was some kind of danger to myself. Eleanor was very convincing, apparently. She knew details about our family that made her story seem credible. Jessica poured David a glass of water. "What kind of details?" She knew I'd been traveling for work more frequently. She knew about Mom's doctor appointments. She even mentioned that you'd been staying here more often, Jessica, like that was evidence of some kind of family emergency. I felt violated in a way I hadn't expected. "She's been watching us, cataloging information." "For how long, though?" David ran his hands through his hair. "I mean, how long has she been collecting details about our lives to use in these stories she's telling people?" The three of us sat in uncomfortable silence as that question hung in the air. I thought back over the past year, remembering all the casual conversations Eleanor and I had shared. All the times she'd asked seemingly innocent questions about my family, my health, my daily routines. "I need to write this down," I said suddenly. "All of it. Every lie she told Dr. Phillips, every story she spread to the book club, and now this hotel incident. If this continues to escalate, we might need documentation." Jessica nodded approvingly. "That's smart, Mom. David, can you write down exactly what happened at the hotel while it's fresh in your memory?" "Already started." David pulled out his phone and showed us a lengthy note he'd typed. I documented everything from the moment the manager knocked on my door to Eleanor following me in the parking lot. I looked at my two children, both of them taking action to protect our family, and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with anger. Eleanor's actions were forcing us into a defensive position, making us document and prove our own mental competence and family stability. "There's something else we need to consider," I said quietly. "If Eleanor is willing to involve hotel staff she's never met before, what other strangers might she approach? What other institutions or people might she contact with her version of our story?" David and Jessica exchanged worried glances. "You think she might contact other people?" Jessica asked. "I think Eleanor has convinced herself that she's saving us from ourselves. People who believe they're on a rescue mission can be very persistent." I paused, a terrible thought occurring to me. "David, did you mention to her that you were traveling for the promotion opportunity?" David's face went pale. "Not directly, but she might have overheard me talking to you about it on the phone." "Why?" "Because if she's willing to sabotage my relationship with my doctor and my book club, and now she's involving hotel staff in false wellness checks." I couldn't finish the sentence. "You think she might contact my work?" David's voice was barely a whisper. Before I could answer, the landline rang again. All three of us stared at it, afraid to move. The ringing seemed to echo through the living room like an alarm bell, each chime making my stomach clench tighter. David stood frozen by the window, his face drained of color at the thought that Eleanor might somehow reach his workplace. "I'll answer it," Jessica said, moving toward the phone with determined steps. "If it's Eleanor, I'm done being polite." She picked up the receiver with a sharp motion. Hello? I watched my daughter's face carefully, trying to read her expression as she listened. Her eyebrows drew together in confusion rather than anger, which gave me a small measure of relief. Oh, hi, Mrs. Chen. Yes, she's here. Just a moment. Jessica held out the phone to me. It's your neighbor from 2 houses down. She says it's about your mail? I took the phone with shaking hands, grateful it wasn't Eleanor, but puzzled by the timing. Mrs. Chen and I exchanged pleasantries maybe twice a year. Hello, Mrs. Chen. How can I help you? I hope I'm not bothering you, dear, but I wanted to let you know that your friend Eleanor stopped by my house about an hour ago. She seemed very concerned about you. My blood ran cold. David stepped closer, and I could see him straining to hear the conversation. Jessica remained standing next to me, her protective instincts clearly activated. What did she say exactly? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, she mentioned that she was worried about your memory, and she asked if I'd noticed whether you were bringing in your mail regularly. She said sometimes people with early dementia forget routine tasks like that. Mrs. Chen's voice carried genuine concern. I told her that I'd seen you getting your mail just yesterday, but she seemed to think I should keep an eye on you. She even asked if I'd noticed any unusual behavior. I closed my eyes, feeling the room spin slightly around me. Eleanor was systematically contacting people in my life, building some kind of case that I was mentally declining. Mrs. Chen, I want you to know that I'm perfectly fine. Eleanor has some misconceptions about my health that she's unfortunately spreading around. Oh my, that's very concerning, dear. I did think it was odd that she would approach me since we don't know each other well, but she seemed so convinced that you needed help. After I hung up, David was pacing the length of the living room like a caged animal. She's going door to door now? Who else has she talked to? We can't know that, Jessica said practically, though I could hear the strain in her voice. But we can control how we respond to this. I sank into my armchair, feeling suddenly exhausted by the scope of Eleanor's campaign. She's trying to create a community consensus that I'm mentally unfit. If enough people start believing her stories, then we make sure people hear the truth, David said, stopping his pacing to face me. We can't let her control the narrative about our family. Jessica sat on the arm of my chair, her presence comforting. Mom, what do you actually know about Eleanor's background? I mean, has she ever done anything like this before? I thought back through our friendship, realizing how one-sided our conversations had always been. Eleanor asked questions, but rarely shared personal details about herself. I knew she'd been widowed young, that she had no children, but beyond those basic facts, she remained largely a mystery. Not much, honestly. She's very private about her own life. That's convenient, David muttered. She knows everything about us, but we know nothing about her motivations or history. The landline rang again, and this time none of us hesitated. Jessica grabbed it immediately. Hello, Eleanor, she said, after listening for a moment, her voice ice cold. Yes, she's here. No, she doesn't need you to check on her. In fact, we need to talk. I felt my heart hammering as Jessica handed me the phone. Eleanor's voice came through clearly, syrupy with false concern. Margaret, sweetheart, I've been so worried. I spoke with Mrs. Chen, and she mentioned you seemed confused when she tried to help with your mail yesterday. The sound of Eleanor's voice made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wasn't confused about anything, Eleanor. I was simply surprised that you had been discussing my personal business with my neighbors. Oh, Margaret, I think you might be a bit mixed up. I was only trying to help because I care about you so much. Mrs. Chen was quite concerned after your conversation. I felt David and Jessica watching me intently as I gripped the phone tighter. Eleanor, I need you to stop contacting people about me. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." There was a pause, and when Eleanor spoke again, her voice had lost some of its saccharine quality. "I understand you might feel embarrassed, dear, but denial is often part of the process. I've been researching cognitive decline, and many people don't recognize the changes in themselves. The audacity of it took my breath away. She was openly admitting to researching ways to build her case against me." "What process are you referring to, exactly?" "Well, the medication confusion, the forgetfulness about our conversations, and now this defensiveness. I've read that patients often become paranoid and resistant when family members try to intervene." Jessica made a sharp gesture, and I realized Eleanor was trying to manipulate me into proving her point. If I got angry, she'd claim I was being irrational. If I stayed calm, she'd say I was in denial. "Eleanor, I want to be very clear with you. I am not confused, I am not declining, and I do not need your intervention. I'm asking you to respect my boundaries and stop involving other people in your concerns." "Margaret, sweetheart, I can hear the distress in your voice. Why don't I come over so we can talk about this properly? I think if we sit down together, you'll see that I only want what's best for you." The thought of Eleanor in my home right now, with her false sympathy and calculated concern, made my stomach turn. "That won't be necessary. But I think it would really help. I could bring some information I've printed out about resources for people in your situation. There are wonderful support groups and programs that could—" "No, Eleanor, I'm hanging up now." "Margaret, please don't shut me out. I know this is hard to accept, but—" I ended the call and immediately felt like I could breathe again. David was shaking his head in disbelief. "She's completely unhinged. Did you hear how she kept pushing, even after you told her no?" Jessica had gone pale. "Mom, she's not just spreading rumors anymore. She's positioning herself as some kind of caregiver advocate. The way she talked about resources and support groups, it's like she's already planning the next steps." I set the phone down with trembling hands. The conversation had felt like being trapped in quicksand, where every word I spoke could be twisted against me. What scared me most was how prepared she sounded. Like she's been rehearsing these talking points. David started pacing again. "We can't just keep reacting to whatever she does next. She's always going to be one step ahead if we're just playing defense." "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Jessica looked thoughtful. "What if we turned this around? Instead of trying to convince people she's wrong, what if we figured out why she's doing this in the first place?" "You mean like, what's her end game?" "Exactly. Because this level of effort, this systematic approach, it has to be about more than just concern for a friend." I thought about all the questions Eleanor had asked over the months, all the personal information she'd gathered, the way she'd inserted herself into my medical appointments and daily routines. It suddenly struck me how thoroughly she'd mapped out my life. "She knows everything about me," I said slowly. "My finances, my health, my family relationships, my daily schedule. She even has keys to my house." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. David stopped pacing and turned to face us. "Mom, what exactly did you put Eleanor down for?" "Emergency contact, medical decisions, what?" I tried to remember all the forms I'd filled out over the past year, all the times Eleanor had helpfully offered to be listed as a backup contact or reference. The full scope of it was starting to become clear, and it terrified me. But before I could answer, we heard the distinct sound of a key turning in my front door lock. The three of us froze as footsteps echoed through my entryway. Eleanor's voice called out cheerfully, as if she hadn't just had that disturbing phone conversation with me 20 minutes earlier. "Margaret, I brought those pamphlets I mentioned. I know you said you needed time to think, but I was already in the neighborhood. David grabbed my arm. Did you change your locks after Dad died? He whispered. I shook my head, suddenly realizing how vulnerable that made me. Eleanor had offered to help with errands during my grief, and I'd gratefully given her a spare key. Now she was using it to walk into my home uninvited. Margaret, are you here? Your car's in the driveway. Jessica looked toward the living room entrance. Should we just pretend we're not home? She already knows we're here, I whispered back. And honestly, I'm tired of hiding from her. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her arms full of brochures and folders. She stopped short when she saw David and Jessica flanking me on the couch. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Hello, David. Jessica. Her tone had shifted from the artificially sweet phone voice to something cooler, more calculating. Eleanor, David said, standing up. Mom told us about your phone call. We were just discussing some concerns. Eleanor's smile never wavered, but something hardened in her eyes. Concerns? I'm sure Margaret appreciates having such caring children, though I do worry that family members don't always see the full picture when it comes to health issues. She moved into the room uninvited and set her materials on my coffee table. I noticed she'd organized everything with tabs and highlights, like a presentation. Actually, Eleanor, we see Mom every day, Jessica said, her voice steady but firm. We're very aware of her health status. Of course you are, dear, but sometimes when we love someone, we miss the warning signs. Denial is perfectly natural. Eleanor settled into my father's old armchair without being asked. That's why it's so important to have objective observers involved. The casual way she claimed my father's chair felt like a violation. David noticed it too, and moved to stand behind the chair, creating a subtle barrier. What exactly do you think you've observed, Eleanor? I asked, finding my voice. Eleanor opened one of her folders and pulled out what looked like a handwritten log. I've been keeping track of concerning incidents over the past few months. Just little things, but they add up to a pattern. She started reading from her notes. October 15th, you seemed confused about what day trash pickup was. October 22nd, you asked me the same question about your neighbor's new fence twice in one conversation. November 3rd, you were wearing 2 different shoes when I picked you up for lunch. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. You've been keeping a file on me? Not a file, Margaret. Documentation. These details matter when healthcare providers are trying to assess cognitive function. David leaned forward. Are you seriously suggesting that asking about trash day twice means Mom has dementia? Not dementia necessarily, Eleanor said, her tone infuriatingly patient. But these could be early indicators of various conditions. Memory issues, medication side effects, the natural aging process. Jessica stood up abruptly. This is insane. Mom, she's been stalking you, writing down every time you had a normal human moment and turning it into evidence of decline. Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. I hardly think caring about a friend's well-being constitutes stalking, Jessica. Perhaps if you visited more often, you'd notice these changes yourself. I visit Mom 3 times a week. Jessica shot back. I help with her grocery shopping, we have dinner together regularly, and she's never shown any signs of confusion or memory problems. That's exactly what I mean about family denial. You see what you want to see. I'd heard enough. The violation of having my private moments cataloged and analyzed was overwhelming. But what made it worse was Eleanor's absolute certainty that she was right and we were all wrong. Eleanor, I want my key back. She blinked, clearly not expecting this direct approach. I'm sorry? My house key. I want it back. Right now. Eleanor's hand moved protectively to her purse. Margaret, I think you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. You gave me that key because you trusted me to help. What if there's an emergency? Then I'll call 911 like any other person would. But what if you're not capable of making that call? What if you're confused or disoriented? David stepped closer to Eleanor's chair. She's asking for her key back. That's not a negotiation. Eleanor looked between the three of us, and for the first time, her mask of concerned friendship slipped completely. What I saw underneath was something cold and calculating. I see what's happening here. You've all convinced yourselves that I'm the problem, when I'm the only one willing to face reality. She stood up, clutching her purse. Fine. You want to enable Margaret's decline? That's your choice. She reached into her purse and pulled out my key, but instead of handing it to me, she set it on the coffee table next to her pamphlets. But don't come crying to me when something terrible happens because no one was paying attention to the warning signs. Eleanor headed toward the door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Margaret? Dr. Peterson is expecting my call tomorrow about how you handled today's conversation. I promise to update him on your response to our discussion about medication compliance. The threat hung in the air as her footsteps receded toward the front door. We heard it slam shut, followed by the sound of her car starting in my driveway. I sank back into the couch cushions, feeling drained. She's going to call him tomorrow and tell him I was defensive and irrational, isn't she? David picked up my key from the coffee table and handed it to me. Probably, but now we know exactly what we're dealing with. Jessica was looking through Eleanor's abandoned pamphlets. Mom, look at this. These aren't just general information brochures. They're specifically about involuntary psychiatric holds and competency evaluations. The blood drained from my face as the full scope of Eleanor's plan became clear. The silence that followed Jessica's observation stretched like a taut wire through my living room. I stared at the pamphlets scattered across my coffee table, their clinical titles swimming before my eyes. The late afternoon sun slanted through my windows, casting everything in a golden light that felt mockingly cheerful given what we'd just discovered. Involuntary psychiatric holds, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. She's been planning this. David sat heavily in the armchair Eleanor had vacated, running his hands through his graying hair. This explains so much. The sudden concern about your medications, the frequent visits, all those questions about whether you were feeling confused or forgetful. Jessica picked up one of the pamphlets and read aloud. A 72-hour hold can be initiated when a person presents a danger to themselves or others due to mental illness or is gravely disabled and unable to provide for their basic needs. She looked up at me, her face pale. Mom, she's been documenting evidence to fit these criteria. My hands trembled as I reached for my tea, now gone cold. The familiar weight of my house key in my palm felt precious after having been violated for so long. All those times she let herself in and found me napping, or when I was still in my pajamas in the afternoon because I'd had a rough night. She was building a case. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Eleanor and I had been friends for over 15 years. We'd supported each other through divorces, celebrated our children's graduations together, shared countless cups of coffee over kitchen tables, discussing everything from neighborhood gossip to our fears about aging. How had I missed the calculation behind her concerned smiles? David leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. The really sick part is how she positioned herself as your closest friend to Dr. Peterson. She made herself indispensable as your primary support system, then used that position to undermine you. But why? The question burst out of me with more anguish than I intended. What does she gain from this? Jessica set down the pamphlet and moved to sit beside me on the couch. I don't think it's about gaining something, Mom. I think it's about control. Some people get addicted to being needed, to being the hero in someone else's story. When you started getting better, managing your depression more effectively, she lost her purpose. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. I thought about the past few months, how I'd been feeling stronger, more capable. I'd even mentioned to Eleanor that I was considering going back to work part-time, maybe volunteering at the library again. Her reaction had been swift and discouraging. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of stress? She'd asked. What if it triggers another episode? She needed me to stay sick. I realized aloud, the words tasting bitter. Every time I showed improvement, she found new reasons to worry. David's jaw tightened. And now she's backed into a corner. You're calling her out, we're all supporting you, and her carefully constructed narrative is falling apart. My phone buzzed on the side table, making all three of us jump. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen, and my stomach lurched. Don't answer it, Jessica said immediately. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing, then watched as a voicemail notification appeared. She said she was going to call Dr. Peterson tomorrow. What if she moves up her timeline? What if she convinces him that this confrontation proves I'm having some kind of breakdown? The golden afternoon light was fading now, and shadows began creeping across my living room floor. Everything felt different in my house now that I knew Eleanor had been cataloging my private moments, analyzing my routines for signs of incompetence. The sanctuary I'd worked so hard to maintain felt violated. We need to be proactive, David said, standing up and beginning to pace. We can't just wait for her next move. Jessica nodded, her journalistic instincts kicking in. Mom, do you have any documentation of your actual medication compliance? Pill counts, pharmacy records, anything that shows you've been taking everything correctly? I thought about it. I have all my prescription bottles, and I keep a daily pill organizer. I could photograph it to show I'm taking everything as prescribed. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now planning to document my own life the way Eleanor had been doing, except truthfully. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Eleanor. This time, none of us even considered answering. She's persistent, David observed grimly. Or desperate, Jessica added. Think about it. She's invested months, maybe longer, in building this case against Mom. If it falls apart now, what does that say about her judgment? Her credibility with Dr. Peterson? The phone rang a third time. Eleanor's face smiled back at me from the screen, a photo from last Christmas when she'd helped me decorate my tree. I'd been so grateful for her friendship then, so thankful to have someone who cared enough to spend her holiday helping me feel less alone. I have to listen to the voicemail eventually, I said as the ringing stopped again. Not necessarily, David replied. You don't owe her anything, Margaret, not after what she's done. But even as he spoke, I knew I would listen. The need to understand, to hear what new manipulation or threat she might be crafting, was too strong to ignore. Jessica was examining another pamphlet. Mom, look at this. There's a section here about concerned family members and friends and their role in initiating mental health interventions. She's been studying this like a manual. The realization that our friendship had become Eleanor's project, her mission, left me feeling hollow. How many of our conversations had been genuine, and how many had been fishing expeditions for evidence of my supposed decline? As if reading my thoughts, David said gently, This isn't your fault, you know. People like Eleanor are skilled at manipulation. They make themselves seem indispensable while slowly undermining your confidence in yourself. My phone screen lit up with a text message. Eleanor's name appeared, and despite myself, I read it. Margaret, I know you're upset, but please don't let pride prevent you from getting the help you need. I'm here for you, as I've always been. We need to talk before I speak with Dr. Peterson. The casual threat embedded in concern made my blood run cold. Jessica looked at the text message over my shoulder and shook her head in disgust. She's threatening you right there in black and white. Before I speak with Dr. Peterson? That's not concern, Mom. That's manipulation. I set the phone face down on the coffee table, unable to look at Eleanor's words any longer. How did I not see this? All those times she offered to drive me to appointments, insisted on coming in with me, asking about my medications. I thought she was being helpful. Because that's what she wanted you to think, David said, settling back into his chair. The best manipulators make their victims grateful for the abuse. They position themselves as the only person who truly cares, the only one looking out for you. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Eleanor. This time, I didn't even glance at it. I need to call Dr. Peterson first thing Monday morning, I said, feeling a surge of determination. I want to get ahead of whatever story Eleanor is planning to tell him. Jessica nodded approvingly. Good. And bring all this evidence with you. The pamphlets, the pills she moved, everything. Show him the pattern. What if he doesn't believe me? The fear that had been gnawing at me all evening finally found its voice. What if he thinks I'm paranoid or making excuses? David leaned forward, his expression serious. Then you find a new doctor. Any physician worth having will listen to their patient's concerns, especially when you have documentation to back them up. The phone buzzed a third time. I could see Eleanor's name lighting up the screen repeatedly, each message more desperate than the last. Part of me felt sorry for her, wondered what had driven her to this obsessive behavior. But a larger part felt angry at being treated like a project instead of a person. I'm turning this off, I announced, powering down the phone completely. I can't think clearly with her constantly messaging. The silence that followed felt profound. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for Eleanor's next call or text, wasn't bracing myself for her latest concern about my health or memory. The relief was overwhelming. You know what I realized? I said, looking at my children. I stopped trusting myself because Eleanor convinced me I couldn't. Every time I knew I'd taken my medication correctly, every time I remembered something clearly, she'd plant just enough doubt to make me question it. Jessica squeezed my hand. That ends now. You're sharper and more capable than she ever gave you credit for. The fact that you figured out what she was doing proves that. David stood up and began gathering the scattered pamphlets. Should we get rid of these? No, I said quickly. I want to show Dr. Peterson exactly what she was planning. Let him see how calculated this whole thing was. As David stacked the materials neatly on the side table, I felt something shift inside me. The woman who had doubted her own memory, who had second-guessed every decision, was being replaced by someone stronger. Someone who refused to be anyone's victim. The evening stretched ahead of us peacefully. For the first time in months, I wasn't dreading tomorrow or worrying about what Eleanor might report to my doctor. I was ready to take control of my own story again. Thank you both, I said to Jessica and David. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here today. Nothing would have happened, Jessica replied firmly, because you were already starting to figure it out. We just helped you see what you already knew. As we settled in for the rest of the evening, my phone remained silent on the table, and I felt truly at peace for the first time in months.